Right, well, I had a quick look on the back of the files to see what they were like, and it recorded quite well, so I'm quite happy with that. So we'll finish up the last of this shutter, I think. Let's clean up this component and its screw and pop them into place. This component controls the diaphragm setting. The dirty marks that you see there are a little bit of lacquer. They're not going to cause us any harm. It's just from when it was assembled. Now this, let's get to make sure we can get where you're seeing it. Yeah, that's fine. This sits in here like that. Spring can come around. We'll seat that in position shortly. Pop that screw in. Swing that spring into position against there. How everything works correctly. So the shutter's cocked at the moment, and as the shutter is released, first the shutter blades and the diaphragm close down to the preset settings, then they open and close to make the exposure. And as long as that all times correctly with the sequence of the mirror box, the film is only exposed for the time set on the shutter. And I expect that that looks all correct to me at the moment. What I want to do, run a little bit of molybdenum down this cam surface here that the diaphragm runs on. That all looks good. What else have we got missing from the back? This shim or spacer ring. That goes on the back of the shutter, and that would either do one of two things. Either it was a carefully chosen shim made to adjust the position of the shutter and its associated lenses so it correctly focuses to the film plane, or it was a standard thickness shim that was there to provide adequate clearance for the mechanism. And so I'll move on to the next part. Put that back on the mirror box. Here we have the mirror box, and I mentioned earlier I didn't like the look of the mirror. So I'm just going to see if this front plate lifts off to give me better access to the mirror and see if I can clean it. The mirror, of course, is front surface silvered, which means that that surface is very, very delicate. Normal mirrors that you have around the house, the silver is on the back of the glass. So the glass is the surface open for you to damage. On a front surfaced mirror or first surface mirror, the silver's on the front surface and is easily damaged. See if that plate will lift off. I might be barking up the wrong tree here. No, that came off. And I'm looking at that mirror It's very, very hazy looking. I don't like the look of that at all. I'm just looking at this bump stop foam here. That's had it. That's it's like concrete. That'll have to be replaced. Might as well peel that off now. It doesn't even flex. Like a little piece of coal. Right. Let me find my stuff and see if I can clean that front surface. I'm going to try various potions. I'm just attacking one corner of it first, just to see if I can make any impression in it. It wasn't very exciting. Let me try something else. This very much depends on what the haze is made up of. The silver might be oxidised there, it might never come clean. That looks more promising. Try something else again. The usual advice with front surface or first surface mirrors is don't touch them. Don't clean them with anything. You'll only make a mess. But if they're already buggered, you can't make them worse than that. Isopropyl alcohol is obviously not the ideal choice. That didn't make much of a dent in it. At the moment it looks like window cleaner is going to be the job. But let me try a little bit of acetone. No, nothing. Window cleaner it is. The cheapest and least exotic fluid I have available. I don't expect to get this looking perfect. I just want to make sure I remove surface contaminants that we can remove so that it's possible to focus through the viewfinder. The only alternative, of course, being replace the mirror. I don't fancy my chances of replacing them. Well, I will never find parts for it. Won't find the original, which means I would be searching for another piece of first surface glass, and I would have to cut it to fit. These cotton buds or Q-tips I'm using here are particularly soft. A lot of the ones that you get are like little hard blocks of white, fluffy, vaguely fluffy wood on the ends of the sticks, and not ideal for very delicate jobs like this. I might try isopropyl alcohol over that now that I've cleaned it with that. Well, I have to say that's not very inspiring looking at all, but I know from experience that mirrors there can be quite bad before it creates any problem with viewing through the finder. So while I've got that front plate off, I'm going to cut a new piece of foam and put it in there for that mirror box dampener. Alright, let me get this piece of foam in place. If I can get the backing off it. And the shutter's still as noisy as buggery, but that's life as we know it. Let's get this plate back in place. And it might have been a very clever thing if I'd taken note of which way up that was before I took it off, because I see it's not symmetrical. I may have to consult some earlier pictures. Back in a minute. Right, well I did a little bit of consulting of previous footage and decided that it goes this way up. Just check that that's all sitting correctly in place. We'll pop its 4 screws back in. This baffle's main job here will be to limit the amount of light that's bouncing around inside the mirror box and reducing contrast on the film. That's good. Well, I'll pop that to one side. We'll finish mounting the shutter to the front plate, then we'll put the front plate on the mirror box. The front plate and the retaining ring. This will need a particularly good wipe with solvent because I have splashed all sorts on here in an effort to get that retaining ring loose earlier, and we don't want solvents, or we don't want lubricants rearing their ugly head and moving to places where we won't want them. Let's get this all wiped, and the retaining ring. I'll have a look at these slots and see if they are too ugly to be used. If I think they won't engage a tool correctly, then I would have no option but to cut new slots. I think they'll still work. They're going to be touched up with paint regardless, so I think that's good enough for us. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? No. Alright, so the shutter to the front. The wire, I think, drops through that side. Yes, there's that post I told you about, and here's its locating hole there. This lever needs to pop through under here, like that. Pull that wire through. And that shutter should just sit in there like that. Line up that post, that's lined up. This pin on the back of the shutter drops in inside this space. I can see there's a little bit of moisture there I'd rather not have. That will be a bit of lubricant, I think. And the retaining ring, let's put it in and see if it'll run on smoothly. Beautiful. You'd never know there was a problem. That looks good. I've got to find the tool to start tighten that thing up. Here we have it. I found it, so we should be in business. And that was all that was wanted. I don't know what monstrous tool they used to install that with last time, but it was a bit over the top. That looks good. Covering up time. Disguise those two spots of shiny with something black. This is all behind the baffle where it can't be seen. So a little bit of marker pen here. Just dot that in there. Good as gold. That all looks good. So assemble this to the mirror box. What have we got? this wire has to run around that channel to be out of the way and be long enough to go where it needs to go. The wire feeds through this hole here. You pop that through there. Let's drop that mirror box into place for the moment. Just settle it. That feels right. Cock it. And I can hear that shutter working correctly. So that's all good. We know that basically that's sound. I've got to get this wire seated correctly around the front of that shutter and mirror box. And I'll know I've been successful when it actually extends all the way to this post where it gets soldered. That actually looks like it's quite good. So, where are our screws? We got 4 screws, 2 brass ones and 2 nickel plated ones, I think. And I've got to find out where I've put those. I found them. So we have 2 brass screws. They go over here. And 2 nickel plated screws go down that hole. Actually, when I look at those, they're chrome plated, but there was no need for them to be chrome plated, so it means that they were screws that they had available to do the job, and so I used them up. This other one is just about under that wire, so I've got to pull the wire back out of the way a bit, get this screw down inside there, and then get that wire back in position. See if this will work. Not really, that's a bit better. That's screwed in tight. That's screwed in tight. The 2 on this side, one we have in position, and the other one has this clamp here that holds that wire in place. See if we can get that to sit nicely. Get this back into shot. Move that out of the way before I knock it over and lose the screws. That's it. Check the wires long enough. That is, we've got just enough pulled through. Tighten those screws up. The other 2 are already tight. What's that look like from the front? It's looks good to me. You can see here the feature of the Mamiya family, which is unusual. You've got stop down lever here. You can stop it down to the aperture you've set it to, and that allows you to preview your depth of field, which is a feature that was not available on any other leaf blade shuttered SLR as far as I'm aware. Here we go. Now I'll have to solder that wire on, which you don't need to watch because it's not very exciting making a single solder joint, and that can be fitted back into the body, and we shall see if the camera functions. Somebody was looking over my shoulder and telling me what to do next. This is no good because I haven't installed the rear lens group, and we can't install it through the back of the mirror box. So we'll whip out these 4 screws and do the job in the correct order. Here we go. Find that lens, clean it up and put it in place. Well, here's our rear lens element. I'm looking at it now. I can certainly see something on the surface, and I'm pretty sure that's fungus. Let's clean it and see what happens. Now, when you're removing fungus from lenses, typically one of 2 things happens. If you're very lucky, the fungus cleans off, there's no sign that it was ever there, and everything's as good as gold. And if you're not very lucky, the fungus will have etched its way in to the coating, or what's more likely the case, the waste products of the metabolism of the fungus have etched their way in. That looks good. That looks like that cleaned up very well. Now I'm just going to give that a good swab around there with a bit of isopropyl to make sure that we kill anything that's likely to cause us future grief. It looks good. I'll clean that once more with the glass cleaner, and then we'll pop that in place. Now that did clean up very well. Sometimes when you're cleaning lenses, you will be left with marks on the coating, particularly if you look at them at a very oblique angle. They'll look ugly, and you'll be thinking that your lens is ruined and it'll never take a good photo. But in practice, you get away with an awful lot. I'm sure if you hunt around on the internet, you'll be able to find examples of people taking photos with lenses with large amounts of physical damage, big scratches, gouges, even lenses that are cracked right across, and they're still quite capable of producing a good result. So minor blemishes often make very little difference, or at the most are likely to leave you with slightly lower contrast than you might otherwise have had. Now I'll need a tool to tighten that up, so I better go and find it.